The void trembled as the Corvathian hegemony's war fleet emerged from hyperspace, their crimson hulls gleaming like fresh blood against the star-scattered darkness. Fleet Admiral Nexus Velthera stood upon the command deck of the Eternal Dominion, watching through the vast observation ports as another civilization's defenses crumbled before their might. "Target their orbital platforms first," Velthera commanded, her 4 arms working the tactical displays with practiced efficiency. "Leave their homeworld intact. We'll need the workforce." The battle was over in 17 minutes. Standard protocol. The hegemony had perfected this dance of destruction across 300 conquered systems. Their quantum phase cannons tore through enemy shields like tissue paper. Their adaptive armor shrugged off return fire, and their neural link coordination allowed the fleet to move as a single predatory organism. Commander Jex Golmaran, Velthera's chief strategist, approached. "With the casualty report." "0 losses, Admiral. 3 minor hull breaches on the Wrathbringer, already sealed. Enemy resistance was predictable." Velthera's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. Predictable. That word had defined their conquest for the past 2 cycles. Every species they encountered followed the same patterns: linear tactical thinking, emotional decision-making, individual heroics that accomplished nothing but spectacular failure. The hegemony's mathematical approach to warfare had never failed. Them. "What's our next target?" she asked, already knowing the answer from the scouts' reports. "System designation XK739. The locals call themselves humans." Golmuran's translator struggled with the alien syllables. Single homeworld, scattered colony settlements, primitive kinetic weapons, chemical propulsion. Their largest warship, masses barely 3 kilometers. Velthera's compound eyes gleamed. Humans. She'd heard whispers about this species from the frontier scouts. Supposedly, they were newcomers to the galactic stage, having achieved faster-than-light travel only, recently. Their ships were crude, their technology centuries behind hegemony standards. "Fleet strength?" she inquired. "Estimated 47 vessels of various classes. Intelligence suggests they're attempting to form some sort of defensive perimeter around their homeworld." Golmaran's tone carried the dismissive amusement of a seasoned predator discussing prey. "Their tactical formations appear to be based on water-based naval warfare from their own history." The bridge crew's chittering laughter filled the air. Water-based naval tactics? Against the hegemony's 3-dimensional combat doctrine? It would be a massacre even by their standards. Velthera studied the holographic display of the human system. Sul, they called it. A yellow star with several planets, the 3rd one teeming with their species. Population estimates suggested nearly 8 billion individuals, an excellent harvest for the hegemony's labor needs. "Set course for Sol System," she ordered. "Standard conquest formation. I want this finished quickly. High Command is eager to begin strip mining their outer planets." As the fleet began its hyperspace transition, Velthera allowed herself a moment of reflection. 300 victories, not a single defeat. The hegemony's expansion had been so consistent, so overwhelming, that other species had begun surrendering, without firing a shot. The mere sight of their crimson hulls was enough to break enemy morale, but something nagged at her, a fragment from the intelligence reports. The humans had refused the standard surrender terms. Every other species had at least attempted negotiation once they understood the hegemony's power. But the humans? They'd simply said no and started moving their fleet into defensive positions. Foolish, but somehow intriguing. The hyperspace tunnel collapsed behind them as they emerged at the edge of the Sol system, and Velthera's doubts evaporated. Before them lay the human fleet, arranged in their quaint formations, like toys awaiting destruction. Victory number 301 would be theirs within the hour. She had no idea that her eternal winning streak was about to meet its end. Captain Mikhail Razgriz stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, humanity's newest and largest battleship, watching the crimson shapes materialize on the edge of their solar system. The ship was barely 2 years old, still smelling of fresh polymer and ozone from her manufacturing bays on Luna, but she represented the pinnacle of human engineering. "Sensor analysis complete, Captain," reported Lieutenant Commander Yuki Tanaka from the tactical station. 112 enemy vessels. Their smallest ship outmasses our entire fleet by a factor of 4. Razgriz nodded grimly. They'd known this day would come ever since first contact 6 months ago. The Corvathian hegemony's ultimatum had been simple: submit or be destroyed. The United Earth government's response had been equally simple: no. Communications from the "Flagship, sir," announced Lieutenant Vasquez. "They're demanding our immediate surrender." "Standard response, Lieutenant. Tell them to go to hell." Around the bridge, his crew worked with quiet efficiency. These weren't the eager young recruits of old war movies. They were engineers, physicists, former asteroid miners, and deep space salvagers. Men and women who understood that in space, mathematics mattered more than bravery. Admiral Elena Korsakov's voice crackled over the fleet-wide channel from her command ship, the Resolute. "All vessels, this is Home Fleet Actual. Enemy fleet is beginning their approach. Remember, we're not here to win a glorious victory. We're here to buy Earth time to complete the Exodus fleet." Razgriz touched the small photo tucked into his command console. His daughter, Sophia, age 6, already aboard one of the colony ships heading for Alpha Centauri. Like thousands of other families, they'd made the choice to scatter humanity among the stars rather than fight a war they couldn't win. But someone had to delay the inevitable. "Incoming transmission from the enemy flagship," Vasquez reported. "They want to negotiate?" On the main screen, an alien face appeared, chitinous, with compound eyes and mandibles that clicked as it spoke. The translation matrix rendered its words in clipped, precise English. "I am Fleet Admiral Nexus Velthara of the Corvathian hegemony. I offer you one final opportunity to surrender. Your technology is primitive, your tactics obsolete. Submit now, and your deaths will be swift." Razgriz studied the alien's face, noting the casual arrogance, the complete certainty of victory. "Admiral Velthara, I'm Captain Mikhail Razgriz of the United Earthship Indomitable. I have a counter-proposal." The alien's mandibles clicked in. What might have been amusement. "Speak. Go back where you came from, and we won't have to embarrass you in front of your crew." The transmission cut off abruptly. Around the bridge, several crew members chuckled nervously. "Think that got their attention, sir?" asked Tanaka. "Oh, I'm counting on it," Razgriz replied, watching the enemy fleet begin its attack run. "Mr. Petrov, power up the Casimir drive. Ms. Chen, begin charging the antimatter torpedo tubes. And somebody get me a damage report on our ablative armor. We're about to find out if our engineers are as smart as they think they are." The Indomitable shuddered as her experimental systems came online. Deep in her engineering sections, exotic matter swirled through containment fields that pushed the boundaries of known physics. Her hull bristled with weapons that existed more as theoretical constructs than proven designs. She was humanity's greatest achievement and their most desperate gamble, all wrapped into one untested package. Enemy fleet accelerating to attack. "Speed," reported Tanaka. "They're using some kind of formation I've never seen before. Perfect three-dimensional coordination. It's like they're all connected somehow." "Probable neural link," mused Dr. Yamoto from the science station. "Our xenobiology report suggested something like that. If their entire fleet shares information instantaneously, then they fight as one organism instead of individual ships," Razgriz finished. "Good thing we planned for that." He activated his personal comm channel to the engineering deck. "Commander Singh, how's our little surprise coming along?" "The quantum resonance field is stabilizing, Captain. We'll be ready when you are." Razgriz smiled grimly. The hegemony had conquered 300 civilizations using the same tactics, the same overwhelming technological superiority. But they'd never fought humans before, and humans had a gift for turning their weaknesses into strengths. The first salvo from the hegemony fleet lit up space like a newborn star. Quantum phase beams lanced through the void, designed to penetrate any known shielding technology. The human formation scattered as planned, their ships moving with the coordinated chaos of a school of fish evading a predator. Admiral Velthera watched with cold satisfaction as her weapons found their marks. The human ships were faster than intelligence had suggested, but speed meant nothing against the hegemony's targeting systems. "Direct hits on 7 vessels," reported Golmaran. "No apparent damage." Velthera's mandibles stopped clicking. "Repeat that." "No apparent damage, Admiral. Their hulls are absorbing our weapons fire somehow." On the main display, the human ships continued their evasive maneuvers, their hulls now glowing with an eerie blue radiance where the phase beams had struck. Instead of the expected hull breaches and atmospheric venting, the energy seemed to be spreading across their surfaces, like liquid light. "Impossible," Velthera hissed. "No material can simply absorb quantum phase energy." But even as she spoke, she watched the human ships complete their scatter pattern and begin to regroup. Not only were they undamaged, they were moving faster than before, as if the absorbed energy was somehow feeding their propulsion systems. Commander Razgriz's voice echoed across space on an open channel. "Is that all you've got? My grandmother hits harder than that, and she's been dead for 20 years. The bridge crew of the Eternal Dominion fell silent. In 300 campaigns, no enemy had ever mocked them during battle. The psychological impact was unsettling. "Analysis," Velthera demanded. Her chief scientist, Dr. Kex Volneron, manipulated his instruments frantically. "The human ships appear to be using some form of exotic matter hull plating. It's not absorbing our energy, it's converting it to zero-point vacuum fluctuations and redistributing it through their propulsion systems. In simple terms, Doctor, they're eating our attacks and using them to go faster." Velthera's forearms clenched simultaneously. Adaptive technology wasn't unknown in the galaxy, but this level of exotic physics engineering should have been beyond any species with such primitive base technology. Increase firepower. Target their largest vessel. The HFY Eternal Dominion and her sister ships focused their combined fire on the human battleship Indomitable. The space around the human vessel became a hurricane of destructive energy that should have vaporized any known material. Instead, the Indomitable began to glow like a captured star, her hull radiating absorbed energy in spectacular auroras of blue and gold. And then she did something that violated every tactical doctrine in the hegemony database. She accelerated directly toward them. "Collision course!" Golmaran reported, his voice cracking with disbelief. "The human vessel is on a direct collision course with our flagship." "Evasive maneuvers," Velthera commanded. But the Eternal Dominion was a dreadnought, built for firepower, not agility. The massive ship began to turn, but her momentum carried her inexorably forward. The Indomitable flashed past their port side with barely 50 meters clearance, moving at speeds that should have torn her apart from tidal forces. As she passed, her weapon ports opened and unleashed a salvo that defied all expectations. Antimatter torpedoes, but not the crude fusion-triggered warheads intelligence had predicted. These were pure annihilation devices, their exotic matter. Casings designed to penetrate hegemony adaptive armor before converting matter directly to energy. The Eternal Dominion shuddered as 3 torpedoes punched through her port armor and detonated deep within her hull. For the first time in 3 centuries of warfare, a hegemony dreadnought suffered critical damage. "Hull breaches on deck 7. Through 12, reported the damage control officer. We're venting atmosphere and coolant. Velthara stared at the tactical display in shock. The human battleship was already beginning another attack run, moving in patterns that seemed to ignore basic physics. Her formation, her firepower, her technological superiority, none of it mattered if she couldn't hit what she was shooting at. "How are they moving like that?" she demanded. Dr. Volnaren's instruments were overloading from trying to analyze the human ship's propulsion. "Admiral, I believe they're manipulating local spacetime. The energy they're absorbing from our weapons, they're using it to create gravitational fields that allow them to basically fall in whatever direction they choose." Velthara felt something she hadn't experienced in 300 victories. Doubt. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were fighting smart. Every weakness in their technology had been turned into a strength. Every disadvantage had become a tactical advantage. They fought like the universe itself was their weapon. And for the first time since the hegemony began its expansion, Velthara wondered if victory was truly inevitable. The battle transformed from a systematic conquest into something the hegemony had never experienced, a fair fight. As the human fleet split into smaller attack groups, their movements became increasingly unpredictable, each ship dancing through space with the fluid grace of creatures born to the void. Captain Razgriz coordinated the attack from the Indomitables. Bridge, his ship serving as both command vessel and primary target. Every hegemony weapon that fired at him was more energy to be absorbed, more speed to be gained, more power for their impossible maneuvers. "Wolfpack 7, you're clear for your attack run," he commanded into his comm. "Remember, hit and fade, don't get cocky." Lieutenant Commander Yuki Tanaka had taken her destroyer, the Fenris, and 4 smaller vessels into a flanking position that should have been impossible to achieve without being detected. But human ships had been designed by a species that learned to hunt in the dark between stars, and their stealth technology was born from centuries of evading detection in the asteroid belt. "Fenris to Indomitable," Tanaka's voice crackled over the comm. "We have a clean shot at their command vessel's engine cluster." "Take it," Razgriz replied. "All wolves, coordinate on my mark." The human attack doctrine was unlike anything in the ESO-A, hegemony's tactical databases. Instead of fighting as individual vessels, they moved like a pack, each ship supporting the others, creating overlapping fields of fire and mutual protection that multiplied their effective combat strength. "Admiral." Velthara watched in growing alarm as her perfectly coordinated fleet began to come apart under the human assault. The neural link that had been their greatest advantage was becoming a liability. Every time a hegemony ship took damage, the pain and confusion rippled through the entire fleet's shared consciousness. Vanguard Prime reports critical damage to her quantum drives, Golmaran announced. "The Destroyer of Worlds is requesting permission to withdraw. They've lost main power." "Denied," Velthara snapped. "All vessels maintain formation. We still outnumber them 10-1. But numbers meant nothing when the enemy refused to fight by conventional rules. The human ships seemed to be everywhere at once, appearing from impossible angles, striking with precise fury, then vanishing back into the cosmic dark before the hegemony's weapons could lock on. Dr. Volnaran worked frantically at his station, trying to understand the human tactical doctrine. "Admiral, I'm detecting massive gravitational anomalies throughout the battle space. The humans aren't just using absorbed energy for propulsion, they're creating localized space-time distortions." "What does that mean?" Velthara demanded. "They're making gravity wells where none should exist. They can literally fall upward, change direction without momentum transfer, create artificial asteroid fields from compressed space-time. They're not fighting us in normal space. They're fighting us in folded space." The revelation came too late. Even as Volnaran spoke, the human destroyer Fenris materialized directly above the Eternal Dominion, having somehow tunneled through folded space to bypass their defensive perimeter. Her antimatter torpedoes struck the dreadnought's engine cluster with surgical precision. The massive ship shuddered as her quantum drives went offline, leaving her drifting helplessly in space. Engineering reports total propulsion failure, the damage control officer announced. "We're dead in space, Admiral." Around them, the battle continued to rage, but the tide had clearly turned. The hegemony's numerical advantage was evaporating under the human pack tactics. For every human ship damaged, 2 hegemony vessels were crippled or destroyed. Captain Razgriz's voice echoed across all frequencies, reaching every ship in both fleets. "This is Captain Mikhail Razgriz of the United Earth ship Indomitable. They offering you the same terms you offered us. Surrender, and your deaths will be swift." Velthara's mandibles clicked in rage, and something else, something she'd never felt before in 300 victories. Fear. "Admiral," Golmaran said quietly, "perhaps we should consider—" "Never!" Velthara slammed all forearms against her. Command console. "Signal the reserve fleet. All vessels, prepare for ramming speed. If we cannot defeat them with weapons, we'll crush them with mass." But even as she gave the order, Velthara knew the truth that her pride refused to acknowledge. The Corvathian hegemony's 300 victory streak wasn't just broken, it was shattered. These humans had done more than defeat them tactically. They'd rendered the hegemony's entire military doctrine obsolete. The prey had become the predators, and the galaxy would never be the same. The hegemony reserve fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, 60 fresh warships arriving to tip the scales of battle. Admiral Velthara felt a surge of vindication as she watched her reinforcements deploy. Even if the humans had found ways to counter hegemony technology, they couldn't overcome simple mathematics. "Signal the reserve fleet," she commanded from her crippled flagship. "Full assault pattern. I want those human vessels surrounded and destroyed." Fleet Captain Zex Mordthane of the Reserve Fleet acknowledged the order, his neural link buzzing with tactical data from the primary engagement. What he saw through the shared consciousness made his chitinous skin crawl. The humans weren't just fighting, they were dancing through space like demons, their ships moving in patterns that seemed to mock the laws of physics. "All vessels, converge on the human formation," he broadcast. "Maximum firepower. Leave nothing intact." But as the reserve fleet moved into attack position, something impossible happened. The human ships, instead of retreating or scattering, began to move toward each other. Their individual gravitational fields began to merge and interact, creating a phenomenon that Dr. Volnaren's instruments could barely register. "Admiral," Volnaren's voice was tight with disbelief, "the human vessels they're linking their space-time manipulation fields. They're creating a collective gravitational matrix." On the tactical display, the 47 human ships moved into a complex three-dimensional formation that resembled nothing so much as the molecular structure of some exotic crystal. As they locked into position, space itself began to bend around them, creating distortions that made conventional targeting impossible. Captain Razgriz's voice echoed across the fleet channels. "All ships, initiate Protocol Mjolnir. Let's show them what happens when you corner a pack of wolves." The human formation began to rotate, slowly at first, then with increasing speed. The gravitational distortions they created started to interact with the local star's magnetic field, creating a feedback loop that turned the entire human fleet into something unprecedented in galactic warfare, a space-time weapon of unprecedented scale. Fleet Captain Mordthane watched in growing horror as his quantum phase beams were bent away from their targets, curving around the human formation like light around a black hole. His own ships began to drift toward the human formation despite their engines running at full reverse thrust. "Retreat," he commanded. "All vessels, emergency hyperspace jump." But the human gravitational matrix was interfering with hyperspace navigation. Ships that tried to jump found themselves pulled out of their transition tunnels and dragged back toward the human formation. The prey had become a trap, and the hegemony fleet was caught in its jaws. Admiral Velthara watched from her disabled flagship as her reserve fleet was systematically torn apart, not by weapons, but by the humans' impossible manipulation of the fundamental forces of the universe. Ships were crushed by artificial gravity wells, their hulls imploding as space-time itself was weaponized against them. "How?" she whispered. "How is this possible?" Dr. Volnaran looked up from his readings, his compound eyes wide with something approaching awe. "Admiral, I don't think these humans are as primitive as we believed. Their technology isn't based on our understanding of physics. It's based on a completely different paradigm. They're not fighting us with weapons. They're fighting us with mathematics." The revelation hit Velthara like a physical blow. The hegemony had conquered 300 civilizations by overwhelming them with superior technology and tactics. But the humans weren't trying to match their technology. They were using principles that rendered technology irrelevant. Captain Razgriz's personal transmission reached her flagship. "Admiral Velthara, this is your final warning. Order your ships to stand down, or we'll be forced to demonstrate the full capabilities of our defensive systems." Defensive systems? Velthara's mandibles clicked in confusion. "What are they talking about? This is clearly an offensive weapon." Volnaran's readings spiked suddenly. "Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy buildup from the human homeworld. Dear gods, they're charging some kind of stellar-scale weapon array. On the long-range sensors, Earth itself began to glow as hidden installations across the planet synchronized their power output. Luna's surface erupted with energy as massive particle accelerators buried in the moon's crust came online. The asteroid belt itself seemed to come alive as mining stations revealed their true purpose, components of a weapons system that spanned the entire solar system. This isn't a battle, Velthara realized with growing dread. This is a test. They've been testing us, studying our capabilities, learning our weaknesses. The real weapons haven't even been deployed yet. The human fleet's gravitational matrix suddenly collapsed, releasing the surviving hegemony vessels from its grip. But instead of pressing their attack, the human ships simply waited. Captain Razgriz's final transmission was delivered with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. "Admiral, you now have 30 seconds to order a full retreat before Earth's planetary defense grid comes online. I should mention that our defensive systems are designed to engage entire invasion fleets. Your current force strength might not survive the experience." For the first time in her military career, Fleet Admiral Nexus Velthara of the Corvathian hegemony gave an order she never thought she would utter. "All vessels, immediate retreat. Emergency hyperspace jump to Rally Point Sigma." As her shattered fleet limped away from the Sol system, Velthara stared at the tactical recordings of the battle. 300 victories, ended by a species that treated impossible physics like simple engineering problems. The humans hadn't just defeated the hegemony, they'd redefined what warfare could be. The news of the hegemony's defeat spread through the galaxy like wildfire, carried by the quantum entanglement networks that connected civilizations across known space. In the capital systems of a dozen major powers, emergency sessions were called as military leaders tried to comprehend the impossible reports. On the core world of Nexareth Prime, the Stellar Confederacy's High Command gathered around a holographic display showing the Battle of Sol system. Fleet Marshal Kaivan Draktor, a veteran of 60 major engagements, watched the recordings with growing unease. "Run it again," he ordered his intelligence chief. "Focus on the gravitational matrix formation." The hologram replayed the moment when 47 human ships had created a space-time weapon that defied every principle of known physics. The Marshal's staff watched in silence as the supposedly primitive human fleet systematically dismantled, the most feared military force in the galaxy. "Analysis?" Draktor requested. Commander Lys Velani, the Confederacy's leading xenotechnology expert, stepped forward. "Sir, We've run the data through every computational model we have. The humans aren't using technology as we understand it. They've somehow learned to manipulate the fundamental forces of reality through mathematical principles that our science can't even categorize. Are you telling me that these newcomers have science more advanced than civilizations that have existed for millennia? No, sir. I'm telling you they have science that's completely different. They approach physics from a perspective that no other known species has ever developed. While we've spent centuries refining energy weapons and defensive systems, they've been learning to treat space-time itself as a programmable medium. Similar conversations were taking place across the galaxy. The Corvathian hegemony's 300 victory streak had been more than just military conquests. It had been the foundation of galactic power balance. Dozens of species had aligned themselves with or against the hegemony based on their presumed invincibility. Now that foundation was cracking. On the trading world of Kepler Station, merchant princes watched commodity prices fluctuate wildly as news of the battle spread. Hegemony war bonds, once considered the safest investment in the galaxy, crashed overnight. Meanwhile, intelligence brokers worked frantically to acquire any information about human technology and capabilities. Captain Mikhail Razgriz stood on the observation deck of the Indomitable, watching as his ship underwent repairs at Luna Station. The battle had cost them more than they'd admitted publicly. Several ships were severely damaged, and their exotic matter reserves were dangerously low. But the strategic victory was complete. Captain, Lieutenant Commander Tanaka approached, with a data pad. Priority message from Earth Command. You're not going to believe this. Razgriz read the message twice before its implications sank in. 17 different species have requested formal diplomatic contact in the last 6 hours. It gets better, sir. The Corvathian hegemony has sent I think the translation is formal acknowledgement of territorial sovereignty. They're essentially agreeing to leave us alone. And the others? Trade agreements, technology exchange, proposals, mutual defense pacts. Everyone wants to know how we did what we did. And everyone wants to make sure we're on their side if it comes to another fight. Razgriz smiled grimly. Humanity had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They'd gone from unknown newcomers to major power in the span of a single battle. But he knew the real test was still to come. What's our response? Admiral Korsakov is convening the first Terran Diplomatic Council. Representatives from every major power are requesting an audience. Sir, they're calling it the Sol Accords. Whatever we decide here will shape galactic politics for the next century. Through the observation port, Razgriz could see the construction yards of Luna Station working around the clock, building humanity's next generation of starships. Each new vessel incorporated lessons learned from the battle, pushing their impossible technology even further. The galaxy had spent millennia believing that military might came from bigger weapons and stronger armor. Humanity had proven that true power came from understanding the universe well enough to make it fight on your side. But with great power came a choice that would define humanity's place among the stars. Would they become the new hegemon? Or would they use their capabilities to create something the galaxy had never seen, a true balance of power based on mutual respect rather than fear? The answer to that question would determine whether humanity's first victory would be remembered as the beginning of their own empire, or as the moment when the galaxy learned a better way to resolve its conflicts. Either way, the age of easy conquest was over. The humans had seen to that. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, representatives from 43 galactic civilizations gathered at Luna Station for the signing of the Sol Accords. The massive diplomatic complex, hastily constructed in the shadow of humanity's shipyards, buzzed with tension and anticipation as species that had warred for millennia found themselves sitting at the same negotiating table. Admiral Elena Korsakov, now bearing the title of Terran Ambassador General, stood before the assembled delegates. Behind her, through the vast transparency of the diplomatic hall, the construction lights of humanity's expanding fleet cast long shadows across the lunar surface. Friends, allies, and former enemies, she began, her voice translated into dozens of languages by quantum communicators. We gather here not as conquerors or conquered, but as neighbors seeking a new path forward. Fleet Admiral Nexus Velthara sat in the section reserved for former adversaries, her once proud bearing now marked by the humility of defeat. The Corvathian hegemony's delegation was smaller than those of minor trading worlds, a stark reminder of how quickly power could shift in galactic politics. The old paradigm is dead, Korsakov continued. For too long, our galaxy has been shaped by the belief that strength comes from the ability to destroy. Humanity offers a different vision. Strength through understanding, power through cooperation, security through shared knowledge. The Stellar Confederacy's representative, Fleet Marshal Draktor, rose to speak. Ambassador General, your words are inspiring, but many of us have seen the recordings of your battle. Your defensive capabilities could devastate entire star systems. How do we know you won't become the next hegemon? Korsakov smiled, and with a gesture, activated a holographic display that filled the center of the hall. It showed the Sol system, but not as the delegates had seen it before. Hidden installations throughout the system were revealed, massive construction projects that dwarfed anything previously imagined. Because, Marshal, we're not building weapons. We're building something unprecedented in galactic history. The hologram zoomed in on a massive structure taking shape in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. It was clearly artificial, but its purpose wasn't immediately apparent to the alien observers. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, now serving as humanity's chief science advisor, stepped forward to explain. This is the Prometheus Array, a stellar-scale laboratory designed to unlock the fundamental secrets of the universe, not for conquest, but for the benefit of all sentient life. The hologram shifted, showing similar projects in other systems, all of them joint ventures with species that had agreed to the new paradigm of cooperation over domination. The same principles that allowed us to defeat the hegemony can be used to terraform dead worlds in decades instead of centuries. Tanaka continued. We can create stable wormhole networks that will connect the galaxy without the risks of traditional hyperspace travel. We can solve the energy crisis that has limited galactic civilization for millennia. A murmur ran through the assembled delegates as the implications became clear. Humanity wasn't offering conquest. They were offering transformation. Captain Mikhail Razgriz, now Admiral of the 1st Terran Fleet, addressed the military representatives directly. To those who fear our capabilities, I offer this assurance. Every human warship will carry officers from allied species. Our defensive technologies will be shared with any civilization willing to pledge themselves to peaceful coexistence. We've learned that the universe is too vast and too dangerous for any one species to face alone. The Corvathian delegate, Velthara herself, rose slowly. Her voice carried the weight of 3 centuries of military doctrine being abandoned in a single moment. The hegemony accepts these terms, she announced. I formally dissolve the Corvathian military expansion doctrine and pledge our shipyards to the construction of the collaborative fleet. It was a moment that changed galactic history. The most feared military force in known space had just surrendered not to superior firepower, but to a superior idea. Over the following days, the Sol Accords were hammered out in detail. Trade networks were restructured, military alliances were reformed, and research agreements were signed that would have been unthinkable just months before. But the most significant change was philosophical. For the first time in galactic history, the major powers were agreeing to share their greatest secrets with each other, to build joint installations for mutual benefit, and to resolve conflicts through collaborative problem-solving rather than warfare. As the signing ceremony concluded, Admiral Razgriz stood once again on the observation deck of the Indomitable, now flagship of the multi-species cooperative fleet. Around him, ships from dozens of different civilizations worked together, their crews learning from each other. their technologies merging into something greater than any single species could achieve. The galaxy had learned the most important lesson humanity had to offer, that true strength didn't come from the ability to destroy your enemies, but from the wisdom to turn them into allies. The age of conquest was over. The age of cooperation had begun, and it had all started with a human battleship that refused to accept defeat, crewed by humans who understood that the greatest victory wasn't winning a battle. It was making sure the battle never had to be fought again. In the end, humanity's greatest weapon hadn't been their impossible technology or their innovative tactics. It had been their fundamental belief that every problem had a solution, and that the best solutions were the ones where everybody won. The galaxy would never be the same. And for the first time in its billion-year history, that change was for the better.